All right, let's go ahead and finish up the. It's going to be a real quick video, and I'm just going to kind of finish up what we're talking about, kind of summarize the difference between the organized and disorganized offender. So I'll just go ahead and do that. So essentially, what we're looking at for organized non-social killer or offender, what we're talking about, especially with murderers. For one, they plan it out very well, and doesn't mean they always get to stick with their original plan, but they are much more likely to be organized, thus plan something out. Um, they they don't have, we all think that, oh, they pick that specific victim because of they've been watching them. Granted, do they watch people? Yes, but it's not always their ideal victim. It depends on circumstances, what's available to them, and so on. But they do have targeted people or types that they tend to go after. Different age groups, particular uh, sexes. For example, most of them go after women. However, people I mentioned earlier in the previous video, like um, Jeffrey Dahmer, went after men, especially young boys or younger men who are homosexuals. Um, and then John Wayne Gacy went for younger boys and tried to get them to experiment with homosexuality and some other things. But for the most part, it was just that he wanted younger men. So there's that. Arthur Shawcross, ultimately, and granted, his first two victims, which he got sent to prison for the first time for, were two younger people, and the younger female was the one he actually had somewhat violated first. But there's that, and then he ultimately later on searched for prostitutes. So we have that. We have Ed Kemper, who typically went after women who attended a nearby university. We have some that. Another interesting fact about Jeffrey Dahmer is that almost all of his victims were, not only were they homosexual, but they were they were not white like he was, and which is different because most crimes occur, including serial crimes. Most crimes occur within race or intra-race, but his was kind of unique in that way. So, moving on, controlled conversation, meaning once they have their victim in control or in possession of that person, they control conversation. They tell them what's going to happen, or they, as you can read there, it's controlled conversation. They're the ones that are in control of the situation itself. Um, they also, it says control the crime scene. They typically will bring their own weapon, weapon of choice. They will, be more likely, if anybody's going to wear gloves, it's going to be an organized non-social offender. They may have their own little kits with them, whether it be a rape kit, whether it be whatever it is that is part of their MO, they'll have some type of kit with them. If they use tape to bind somebody, they'll bring that tape along and take it with them. They will not leave it at the crime scene. Same thing goes with weapon choice. They'll, if it's a gun, same thing, knife, you name it. They typically bring everything they need. They may even take the time to develop a place in their own home, on their own property, or a place where they know they can get away with what they want to do, especially if it's something like extended time frames of rape and torture, things like that. They want a place. They set up a place for themselves that they can have the privacy in order to do those things. If they don't do it in their own home, they'll do it on roads or places where they are more familiar with their surroundings. Leonard Lake, Charles Ang, they ended up building for lack of better terms, a complex um, where they could hold people for extended periods of time and do what they need to do. And they recorded it all those sorts of things. So, all right, submissive victim, they like that. It depends, and we'll get into that in more detail when we talk about different types of murderers. Simply because some of them like to be in control and have submissive victims. Others prefer to have a little bit of fight in them, and they like that and they get enjoyment out of it. But for the most part, yes, they still want submissive victims. They use restraints not because they feel, not because of a lack of confidence. It's more so because they know it has a mental plays a mental role for the people who are their victims. So it may be part of their torture. It may be just the fact that they like to show someone that they are in control. Aggressive acts much more likely to cause more physical harm, whether it be by hand or with weapons. And another thing, body moved means they have a tendency, once they're done committing an act, like if they murder someone, they will actually have the crime scene, but then they'll have a dump site somewhere. That's where they put the body. They won't leave it there at the crime scene. They won't leave it to where it may have evidence on the body itself. So, yeah, there's a little more thinking involved with it and organizing. And like I've told you here, I've already said that stuff, that they take everything with them or try to, and they leave very little evidence. That's why they can get away with it for longer. They plan it out better. Disorganized, you guys can read through some of these. They feel like they have to depersonalize the person in order to do it because it's a lack of confidence kind of a thing. They don't want to have to deal with another person. They just want to go through this act that they or process is what they're trying to do. So that's why they depersonalize the victim. Let's see, minimal conversation. They want to focus once again on the task at hand. Chaotic crime scene, meaning they are so bad at organizing their own thoughts of what they want to do. They typically don't bring their own things like gloves, or they don't bring their own weapons. They use whatever is there. And I know I mentioned that in previous lessons. But once it's there, they don't worry about cleanup. They're just trying to get out of there. That's essentially, it's a blitzkrieg type of attack. They're done with it. They do their thing, and then they get out because they lack that organization skill. They also lack the confidence, or at least self-confidence, in doing that. The sudden violence is that blitzkrieg stuff I was talking about. It's not because they are overly violent during the say during the rape or during the murder itself, or while they have someone captive, but they are sudden in the fact that they feel like they have to catch someone off guard in order to have an advantage over them, so they can overpower them initially. That's basically what they're going for. And if anybody's going to be doing any post-mortem sex, or in essence necrophilia, that would be a disorganized asocial killer. However, you do have some outliers, such as Ted Bundy, who was weird enough to go back and have sex acts with some of the deceased victims. Ed Kemper did some unique things. So both of those guys are a little different in that sense. But most of the time, if you have, what you're going to see is someone who lacks that confidence and lacks the ability to have any type of intimacy with another person who is actually living. What you end up finding is that whatever they're going to do to the person beforehand, harming them, binding them up, or whatever, all that's going to be done before. And then once that person is incapacitated, such as being unconscious or being dead, that is when you're going to find disorganized asocial offenders actually doing the, if you want to call it raping a dead body, or in essence, the sex act itself will be committed once that person is no longer a threat, meaning, once again, unconscious or no longer living, and then they can go back later and commit more sex acts, and So necrophilia is typically seen with disorganized asocial. Doesn't mean you don't see it with anybody else, but it's more common here. Body won't be moved at this scene because they're just trying to get out of there. I don't have to explain all that kind of stuff. So this is a video you guys can watch. If you do, great. In fact, if this is who you chose for your subject, great. You get more information, but I expect you to supply some sources for me. But that's really good. So the next thing I do want to get into, like I said, this video is going to be a little short because I want to have a good solid breaking point. So the next thing we're going to talk about is, as you guys are going to be seeing on the screen here, is going to be rape, and we'll talk about the different types of rape. We'll get into the different categories of rapists and things like that. But as for right now, I'm going to cut it a little short just so we could kind of do a little summary of the differences between an organized, disorganized, so organized, non-social, disorganized, asocial offenders. Once again, please email me with questions that you have, or contact me. That way I can help answer questions so that you can better understand it, better apply it, and also will help you with your quiz. And for those of you that actually listen to this, I know, and I'm going to send out a reminder anyway, or an announcement, an email about some people are like, well, how do you? I didn't buy the Profiling Violent Crimes book at the beginning of the semester for whatever reason. If you guys didn't have weren't able to buy it, chose not to buy it, it doesn't matter. What I'm going to tell you is, like I told you beginning of the semester, I recommend buying these books because I think it will help you understand the material better. It gives you another avenue to learn it, another avenue to review it. Okay. Is it absolutely required? No, but I do strongly suggest you go over. If you don't read it, don't have it, whatever. Definitely listen to these lessons. I mean, I know I'm not an absolute expert on everything of it, but every aspect of it. But you're going to get a lot of information from these different videos and lessons that I have. And if you read over that, look at the PowerPoints, and actually pay attention, take notes, things like that, you will probably do well. You should do well on these quizzes and tests that you're going to have, because you will have a test coming up soon. You're going to be having one that covers, the profiling violent crimes in terms of the disorganized asocial offenders, the organized non-social offenders, and the different types of, say, different rapist types and the different murder types. I may even get into arson, whatever the case. But then you have the final culmination of being able to put all those together and have a bigger test covering all of it. But I will explain as we go. But know that you need to pay attention to and actually look over the material. The book itself, the Profiling Violent Crimes book, is not overly expensive. You can get one. I've seen them. I think the most expensive one I saw was like, I'm going to say $17, which isn't that bad. And I know the Mindhunter, if you guys don't have it or can't, or you're a slow reader or whatever, which I suggest you reading it. But if you can't, I know that you can get the app Audible, and you can actually have the Audible version of that book and have someone read to you, basically, that book. And it will, if you go through Audible, you can have that app and try it out for I think it's like a month. And then if you get it done within a month, as long as you cancel your membership, you don't have to pay anything. So I think it's a good idea to do that. All right, well, I'm going to end this one because I'm running short on time. I know I wanted to get some of that information out there to you. So next thing we'll be talking about will be rape and rapist types. Have a good one.